And we're back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, and Game Source. We thank you so much for watching and listening. And if you get a chance, please go ahead and get us that 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, if you can like, share, subscribe, follow, or do whatever it is that you can to support us right here at the Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, the Lakers Fast Break, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Of course, the great folks at Dom-iNation Sports Nation. Go ahead and check out what Dom and Chris Lardieri are doing today as they chat about the sports world right there for you at the Dom-iNation Sports Nation. Plus, also as well, our friends at the Lakers Fast Break as we cover the world of NBA like no one else with our awesome opinions right there for you at the Lakers Fast Break. And if you can support all of that, it is sincerely appreciated. Well, it is finally here for fantasy football owners. Week 17 in the NFL means none other than the championship in virtually all the fantasy leagues out there. Thanks so much again for watching and listening. It's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It has come down to this. There are only 2 teams left in your league. They're fighting it out. Are you one of them? If you are, your palms are getting sweaty. You're getting nervous, or at least you should be, because it is that time. The right moves need to be made. The lineup changes need to be made that are really going to help you out. What lineup changes will you make? Do you still need to go ahead and make waiver wire pickups? What do you need to do? We're going to go ahead and share some thoughts on what you need to do for the finals. For one of the teams in this conversation actually is still in it. I won't say who, but it was a battle of blood, sweat, and tears in NFL Week 16 for many playoffs out there. And no better way to describe it than a couple of great guys right here for you for this week, NFL Week 17. Plus, of course, you know what's on the way with the Doghouse. Good guys indeed. You got to go ahead and check out today the awesome podcast, the Dom-iNation Sports Nation. It is Chris and Dom Lardieri. Chris and a returning Dominic Lardieri. Chris, great to have you back on the show. Our matchup that we talked about on last week's episode, even with 2 1-point earners for me in the starting lineup, I don't know how I did it, but I still beat you by 1 point.
Yeah. Great,
I needed every point, even from those 1-point starters.
Oh, yeah. You did, and congratulations, first of all, on the win. For those of you out there who watched the Chargers-Colts epic last night, we had Eckler score a second touchdown, thought we were in it, and we ended up losing by just over a point. But on behalf of Dom, I apologize. Got psyched out by the weather, and we started Geno Smith over Trevor Lawrence. So I will stew this whole offseason over that move. The weather that was supposedly so brutal in the Meadowlands last Thursday night never materialized. And of course, Lawrence outscored Geno by 5 points. So there's your differential and then some. But regardless, you had your issues. Josh Allen got a late touchdown. Justin Jefferson, thanks to my beloved Giants, got you another touchdown. So we kind of felt the writing was on the wall even before Santa showed up.
This is Jefferson's back. This is the team riding on his back right now.
Absolutely.
Just an incredible performance from Jefferson, made up for the fact that he was, my team actually was just that disappointing right out of the gate on most positions. And he just made up for it in spades with an incredible performance. He is really trying for any and all receiving season records this season. It looks like it appears that he senses that that he's on the cusp of something really great and special. So he is having, I guess, some type of connection with Cousins. Cousins looking really good, and they're working the magic there. Dom, what are your thoughts, man? Because it was a really great weekend in the NFL, really competitive. I'm going to talk to you guys about Tua here in a minute and all the stuff that's gone down with him and the decision making and his future with Miami. But overall, a great weekend in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, surely you had a lot of things happen. You have the Zach Wilson situation, which seems to be getting better every day with the New York Jets. And then you obviously have a lot of good teams, a lot of good games, actually. You had that Cowboys-Eagles game on Christmas Eve. That was a pretty fun one. And then obviously the cruel Giants finding a way to blow a game. At least they tied it up. At least we saw something in Daniel Jones. But I mean, those
you say that his head goes down, and
it was good to see Daniel Jones do well with Richie James as his best receiver. So that's all I'll say about that.
I think there's still a good future for Jones as a quarterback. You want to see him break out. I think that you see talent is there, Chris. You see signs. It's just that he just doesn't have enough around him to get those kind of gaudy numbers that you really think a player that can do things on both at air and ground with him running or throwing the ball can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he definitely benefited by the return to form of Saquon Barkley, Pro Bowler this season. That helped Jones a lot. His running has really come around. But let's be frank, I'm skeptical of him at times. The guy has absolutely no one to throw to between Dave Gettleman, the worst general manager in NFL history, signing someone like Kenny Galladay, botching the draft, passing on Micah Parsons.
I don't know. I think I would say the Houston GMs of recent past are probably worse.
They are. Well, that's Bill O'Brien went on a power trip and won a struggle, and the owner made him the GM, which is a joke. But Gettleman supposedly built the Carolina Panthers into a Super Bowl team and then just completely tore down the Giants. So I think Dable's got to be considered for coach of the year. I don't think he'll get it, but in my mind, he will. You look at the talent on this team, even on the defensive side of the ball with a depleted secondary, they made the most of what they have. The fact that they're likely going to make the playoffs is a huge accomplishment. And I think, once they get out of cap hell and a few more drafts, I think the future's bright, and we'll really know if Jones is the franchise quarterback that they intended him to be.
Dom, I got to ask you this. Probably one of the best waiver wire pickups in a long time for the Rams. Now, no, their season's over, of course. No chance to make the playoffs and all that. But is Baker Mayfield the quarterback of the future for the Los Angeles Rams?
It's hard to say. You don't know how much Matthew Stafford has left in the tank, but depending on that, I think Sean McVay is gonna turn this guy's career around. I mean, obviously he's in the perfect system with Sean McVay in that offense. He hasn't been in that with Cleveland or Carolina. So you're finally seeing the number one pick in him. We're finally seeing what we saw at Oklahoma. So it's good to see him. And how about Tyler Higbee too and Cam Akers? Those are some good fantasy options. If you need a tight end or a flex option, that's good for your fantasy championship. But anyway, I think Baker Mayfield in these up and coming years, he still has a lot of career left in him. I mean, we could see something out of him with the Rams, and like I said, who knows when Matthew Stafford's retiring because he's getting old.
So that brings us again back to the championship game in most leagues, in virtually all leagues, unless you have some type of playoff extender that extends you into the playoffs, which actually be kind of a cool league if you have one. But most leagues will be ending this weekend with the fantasy football playoffs. I want to ask you, Chris, for your championship game, what are you planning? What in past championship games, I know it comes down to, okay, do I ride the players that have been riding all season? Do I go with the hot players like Dominic just mentioned? There's a lot of things you need to consider. There's a lot of things I need to consider before the championship game.
I could speak from experience as someone who totally blew the semifinal game. The hot hand was Geno Smith, but in hindsight, with it being 2020 and all, looking back, the Seahawks have not been, and Geno too, putting up the points the last few weeks like they had in the earlier part of the season, function of playing tougher opponents and other teams catching on to the Seahawks offense. But, on the flip side, Trevor Lawrence is trending upward. And even though the Jets have an excellent defense, at some point you've got to ignore the experts and the matchups and frankly the weather report. And I think at times you do need to go with the hot hand. I
what
think
brought you to the dance, though?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I think you've got to, at least with quarterback, if you've got a guy that's really been playing well and he's starting to sputter, but you've got someone on the bench that's a viable option. I mean, look, if you've got Kirk Cousins as your starter, keep riding him. I don't care if they're playing outside in Green Bay or what Green Bay did against
but
Cousins
like for
previously.
me, I've got for me, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize. But Josh Allen per se, Chris and Dom, and I mean, my backup is Jared Goff, who has been killing it in Detroit the past couple weeks. And I've been sticking with Allen because my mentality, at least the quarterback, is what brought me to the dance. Am I wrong for thinking that?
No, in your case, you're not. You start Josh Allen. Dom and I were convinced the Bills were going to pull him from the game in Chicago with nothing to play for, and he snuck through another TD. But you've got to also look at the matchup. They're playing the Bengals. They're fighting for seeds. You get the 1 seed in the AFC. You got yourself a bye week 1. You got home field locked up. So I think that's going to be a mini playoff game. Goff, while he's played well this year, has not put up the numbers he should have. In the previous weeks, he didn't against the Jets. I know last week against the Panthers, they came back, put up some garbage time points, but I
300 plus
really
yards last week.
he
3
did, but I
touchdowns.
just I mean I think in your case, in my humble opinion, for what it's worth, I think you play Allen. I think he's consistent, and the other thing too is the Bills have to win, and if they're going to win, it's going to be Josh Allen. I mean, I know that they sprinkled in some rushing touchdowns last week, but I think this is a statement game for them. The Bengals are really trying to surge and be the number 2 seed in the AFC, so that's my 2 cents there. But Dom, how about your thoughts?
I don't know. I think this is a statement game for the Bengals, actually. I really like what I'm seeing out of Joe Burrow and this team as a whole. There's no Super Bowl hangover in this team. They played well all year. I like what I'm seeing out of this team. I think they're peaking at the right time as well. So I think, like you said, it's gonna be a great game, Monday Night Football, and I'm excited to see what's there. But the Bills do have something to play for, and the Bengals, they could obviously pass the Chiefs. So there's a lot at stake in this game, but I think this is more of a Bengals statement.
What about players that maybe started to progress through the regular season? Maybe they're younger players getting an opportunity on a losing team. Week 17 could find a lot of players like that. I'm thinking Drake London, who was a top pick from the Atlanta Falcons. He is starting to get some burn as a top end receiver, looking for the future, I guess, from the Atlanta, just to see what he's got. Is he a player or another player like that on a losing team or a team that's really going nowhere? Is that something you also look to as well for a championship game?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit on it earlier. Cam Akers, guy's a man on a mission. He was, rumor has it, about to be released by the Rams, and now he's their featured running back again, like he was in the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year. London's an excellent example. I think too, the guy Dom managed to scoop off of waivers, and had we known then what we know now, would have been a nice flex play over Aaron Jones. Thanks a lot, Matt LaFleur, but I digress. Tyler Algier at running back, right? He's put up some solid points the last few weeks. You look at someone like that, the Dante Foreman in Carolina, guys like that who you may scoff at have bounced around the league. They're going to get you points in these games, and let's face it, the Panthers Buccaneers is a pre-playoff game this week as well.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Again, for many leagues, it is the championship game coming up this weekend, NFL Week 17. But before we preview Week 17, Dom, if there's one bit of advice that you would give somebody, let's say somebody at your school or somebody that you're close to as a friend or whatnot, said, "Man, I'm kind of worried, man. It's the championship game, man." Is there any kind of advice you can give me before heading into the game this weekend? What kind of advice are you going to give?
From our experience against you in our semifinal matchup, do not overthink anyone. That if you have a tough lineup decision, do not overthink it. And my dad and I had that experience with Geno Smith and Trevor Lawrence. I was thinking about it too much, looking at rankings, listening to experts talk about it, and they're all saying Geno Smith, Geno Smith. And we listened and we got a nice 13 points out of him. And Trevor Lawrence in that storm got 18, and that was the difference in our game right there. So I don't like to overthink it. I like to go with my gut. And my stomach was hurting a little not playing Lawrence on that Thursday night game, and it was already too late by that time to put him in the lineup. So that's what I'll say. I'll say if you have a guy that's doing really well, like Trevor Lawrence, for example, just play him. Don't look at the rankings. Don't worry about the weather. Just go with your gut.
And if they lose, or if you get a chance to, try at least with the players that brought you the dance, and it doesn't work out, say, hey, it just wasn't meant to be. I can totally understand that. But Chris, all these years on our show, don't overthink it. I've actually heard, I feel that, I hear that in the back of my head. I just remember the recordings of these playoffs from years gone by. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it, Chris.
Yeah, better.
I just heard you saying that. Just I've actually got, I can find the recordings and whatnot. Just Don't overthink it.
Yeah, didn't heed my own advice. I think in this case, honestly, I got completely psyched out by the weather. And Dom and I remembered earlier in the year, Lawrence had a horrible game in Philadelphia in a monsoon. So I'm not making excuses, but I will say I had that off the field stupidity blank out moment and thought, no, he's not going to do well here. And the Jets have a good defense, and neither was the case. I think my piece of advice would be, and this is one thing that did work out for us last week. We could have played Garrett Wilson over Aaron Jones in the flex, and it really wouldn't have mattered because Zach Wilson's horrible. So if he's really not starting this week, I think that's good for any Jets players you have.
Well, I thought I was going to get burned by Zay Jones, who had a 30-point game, 3 touchdowns. I'm like, I know he's not going to give me 3 touchdowns this weekend, but my gosh, I think he's going to at least get me like 50, 70 yards, get me like 5 to 10 points. And, I thought I was good, but man, just the turnaround is a 30-point turnaround from one week to the next. So you can find yourself on the other end. People that you think that are on that are hot, or the guy that the receiver or the running back that you think is really going to do a number on you that hasn't been consistently that. Those guys, I think, are the make or break. Do you think that makes sense, Dom? What I'm saying is like, okay, you have your consistent, when you're at the championship level, you have a lot of consistent performers on your team. But when you get to the playoffs and then ultimately the championship, there are at least 2 or 3 players on your starting lineup that you got to take a risk on, that you got to take a gamble on. And, even though I got burned by them, I was still able to overcome that, but you won't be able to do that every time.
Yeah, especially in the championship, it gets tight, and you just want to play your best guys. And I always say a guy like Zay Jones will probably have a decent week this week against the Texans, but
when I'm not
honestly,
starting him.
yeah, when he's on that bench, yeah, he's gonna go off for another 30 points. But yeah, it gets tough championship time, and my dad and I think our problem was we didn't have a lot of tough decisions this year, week to week, and we've had that in the past, and that's why we won championships before. And then this year, we were coasting, and then we play you, and there's our tough decision with quarterback and our running backs. So that's what kills you, honestly. Those tough decisions, you just got to make them.
I just see you guys passing by Geno Smith sometime. He's, we're out for coffee. You guys are out to just, going around with the family, and you see him out for coffee and just walk by him and just say, thanks a lot. He's like, what are you guys talking about? Oh, nothing. You just guys walk.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I saw a meme today that apparently some guy lost his fantasy playoffs and that due to that same Chargers Colts game because Justin Herbert took a couple knees and got negative yards and lost by less than a point. So in the grand scheme of things, it could be worse, right?
I have lost by lost a championship by a point and 0.115 or 0.125 points. Yeah, just I lost by the slimmest of margins myself in the semifinal, and then I killed it in the what would have been the final game over anybody I would have faced off as. So yeah, I've lost a league by 1.25 points. I think is probably the lowest. Yeah, so that's really tough. I know it's tough. You guys, even if you guys will probably have like 140, 150 points next week on your team, and you're just like, man, that's the worst feeling. That is the worst feeling in the world. I've been there.
The good thing is we drafted Russell Wilson, dumped him about halfway through the season in favor of Geno, picked up Lawrence a few weeks after that. So at least we're not losing our jobs like Nathaniel Hackett and possibly the Denver GM.
Exactly indeed. But guys, before we head on out, I wanted to go ahead and cover NFL Week 17. It's so weird saying that sometimes, NFL Week 17. So, hey, but that's the way it is now. NFL Week 17's got a lot of still good matchups. We talked about the Cincinnati matchup against Buffalo, still very important. Dom, I'll start with you first. When it comes to NFL Week 17, are there any matchups that stick out in your mind as far as good watching, or for fantasy football owners out there, very important to keep an eye on this weekend?
Well, I think Jets Seahawks is basically your playoff game right here. The loser of this one is definitely out of playoff contention. Both 7 and 8 teams, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot at stake in this game. It's going to be in Seattle. I'm sure it'll be loud. And you have a lot of Jets players on the table with Mike White coming back to being the starting quarterback. So now you got to consider playing Garrett Wilson and some of these other receivers like Elijah Moore maybe. And some of these Jets guys are going to be good options this week with Zach Wilson not being a quarterback anymore.
The love for Zach Wilson right now, my gosh. Whew. Could he be the next Baker Mayfield? Who knows? Who knows? But Chris, are there any good matchups that you're looking at out there this weekend?
Yeah, in addition to the Bills Bengals, I like this Vikings Packers matchup at Lambeau. The Packers need to run the table to try and have a shot at the playoffs. And what we saw in Miami, a glimmer of hope for the Aaron Rodgers believers out there. I think if Christian Watson's healthy, Rodgers is really targeting him a lot in the first half. That's a player we have and we like, but keep an eye on that injury report. On the flip side, as we mentioned, Justin Jefferson's having an insane year and he's looking to break records. I don't know how they're going to contain him. And how about TJ Hawkinson, who the Giants really had problems with? I think he had something like 46 points in our league, and Kirk Cousins really likes throwing to him when Jefferson's being contained. So those are a couple names there. And frankly, Cousins as well. I mean, if you've got him, start him. Guy's been on a mission here as the Vikings are looking to lock up the 2 seed.
One last game I want to cover before we go to the doghouse, guys. And Dom, I'll start with you first. And that's the Dolphins heading over to New England to face off against the Patriots. And there's been a lot said about what happened last weekend, about the fourth quarter for Tua Tagovailoa. And with Tua, there's been a lot of questions about his future. I think he went into concussion protocol again this past weekend after all is said and done. He made some poor decisions, had actually a pretty good 3 quarters, and then just, fourth fell off like a rock. But your thoughts on this whole Tua situation, because it doesn't look like it's the love affair that people had once with Tua in Miami.
It's rough, honestly. I mean, he's had plenty of head injuries now throughout this season, and people are just going to ignore the fact that his brain could be permanently damaged. And you saw the difference of him hitting his head on the ground on Sunday on Christmas. You saw how he throws 3 interceptions after that, and it's just hard to talk about, honestly. It's football, it's a rough sport, and stuff like this is going to happen, but you gotta treat it, and you can't ignore it like how the Dolphins have been, and they could have easily taken him out of that game. Yes, it was a meaningful game. It really paid heavily on their playoff chances, but you got to put your health and safety first of your players. And Tua, as your franchise quarterback, I would have taken him out of the game.
I really think it's going to get ugly. I really think that this might be, as far as something for Tua long term, this might be of great concern. And I really think that I don't know, I'm just speculating here and I'm just guessing, Chris, but that I think at some point in time there might be some legal ramifications that comes out of all this.
Absolutely. You look at how brutal, I know people forget, but that first concussion on Thursday night against the Bengals and the scandal that surrounded that the Bills game as well right before it when he allegedly had a concussion yet passed protocol, and now it's happening again. I mean, the burden's going to fall squarely on the shoulders of Mike McDaniel as the head coach, whether he knew or not. I mean, at that point, you've got to have some sort of caution considering his previous history of getting really bad concussions. And look, I know these guys get paid millions of dollars and their job is to win and make the playoffs, but at some point, these are human beings, and concussions have been a hot button issue for over a decade in this league. And, we're talking about someone's well-being and the rest of his life. He's not going to be a football player forever. I mean, there are countless tragic stories. I mean, top of the list would have to be Junior Seau, and he attempted suicide and eventually succeeded. And they find out he had multiple concussions and the depression he struggled with. I mean, we're here talking about a game, but this could be life and death for some of these guys. And I really feel bad for Tua. You could tell he wasn't the same after the game. I mean, watching on TV on Christmas Day, no one knew this, but the things that are trickling out now are deeply disturbing. And I think we're going to hear from our old buddy Roger Goodell here soon.
And it's very concerning to me because how many is that for him this season alone? Is that 5, 6?
Yeah, we don't know. At least 4 serious ones that we know of, right?
Yeah. Dom, is that, am I in the ballpark there?
I'm pretty sure it was 3 because he had that first one that was ignored, and then the one in Cincinnati, and now we have this one against the Packers.
Okay, I thought he had multiple in one game, so I'm mistaken on that. I mean,
yeah,
that's still
he may
one is serious enough.
Yeah,
still bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very concerning, and I think all the criticism that is coming to his way is unfounded and unwarranted, especially like you said, because of the sheer injuries. Maybe he is, wanting to go back out there. But at some point, you got to go ahead and, like you said, it's his well-being, Chris. It's his well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, this is not the 1970s where we didn't know a lot about it and guys went out there and played with concussions for multiple games. Or look, even in the 80s and 90s, Troy Aikman telling stories about how he was foggy in certain games. Didn't even remember, I want to say, one of the NFC championship games he won. So the league needs to get with the program. The protocols aren't working. I don't know if the finger needs to be pointed at Mike McDaniel, but when a company goes down the toilet, the CEO takes the blame. And as far as I'm concerned, Mike McDaniel's the CEO of the Dolphins, and yeah, just poor judgment to say the least.
I'm hoping that Tua will be okay and he'll be able to have a long, productive life, both on the field and off. Even if it's on the field, let's say his career ends tomorrow, or he decides to go ahead and call it a day. I'm hoping his life will be good for the rest of and long, and that he won't suffer any long term effects from what's gone on, especially in the recent months here in the NFL. So hoping for the best for him. Again, I'm not a huge fan of his as far as, because he's just not, me, I'm not a big fan of the Dolphins, period. But hey, it's his livelihood, and you just hope for the best for someone like that.
Amen. Absolutely. And, you look at recently the ESPN did a story about Andrew Luck and what he's doing post football, and everyone criticized him for retiring so abruptly during training camp a number of years ago. But he basically said he was tired of the injuries and the way his body felt. And a guy was a millionaire many, many times over. It's not like he needed the money. And props to him for doing that. And now coming out years later and telling his story. Not everyone does that. I mean, the guy was the number one pick at that point in time. Probably was on his way to being the best quarterback in football, and look what he did. It just got too much for him, and he's got a better quality of life as a result.
Absolutely, indeed. But before we head on out, Dom and Chris wanted to go ahead and make sure that you guys are aware that it's that time of the show. It's the time that we just, we've wrapped everything up, nice, tidy little bow. We're cleaning all the wrappings and the everything that was torn up to go ahead and open all the Christmas presents. We're starting to put away the Christmas tree. I just put away the Pop Culture Cosmos Lakers Fast Break Christmas tree today. Putting it all, everything boxed up, but everything you go out, you put it in the garage, make sure everything's good, start to put everything away, and then you go out into the garage, you make sure everything is starting to be put back in its proper place. But then you realize, oh, I may have left some stuff out. So I go over to the front yard, hop over everything I can, all the stuff that you put to the side in order to clear out so you can put all the Christmas stuff away. And then you realize, woof, 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 it's still time for one more week to go to the doghouse. Oh, before the playoffs and the Super Bowl, of course.
Absolutely. And, Dom and I were out there on the front lawn today taking down the inflatables in advance of this latest rain coming into SoCal. So
I had to shut mine down because the wind, because that's what's bad here right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, in this case, the doghouse is still intact, but my picks weren't. Last week, rough one. That line in the Eagles Cowboys game moved in my favor to plus 5.5. And what happens? Keeping them with our line here, our theme of the week, that we lost a close one in fantasy. Well, we lost a close one in the doghouse. Cowboys win by 6, but onward and upward. Lines this week, I think the general theme here in December, as Gerald and I have discussed multiple times, the odds makers in Vegas are either onto us or they're not in the gift giving mood. But I did see one line I liked. We mentioned this earlier: Vikings, Green Bay, a key NFC North, not only grudge match, but with playoff implications on the line. I've seen in numerous spots in Vegas online where the Vikings are as high as plus 3.5. Gerald knows how much I love that hook, and maybe it'll work in my favor this week. I'll take them. I think the Vikings have a lot to play for. I think the Packers are a fraud, to be frank with you. That second half of Miami was a function of Tua having a concussion and Mike McDaniel, as we saw in Buffalo. I don't know if he overthinks things or just can't coach well in tight situations, but that was a game the Dolphins should have had and could have won. I don't think the Vikings take their foot off the gas here. Like we said, Justin Jefferson's looking to light up the pack. And I think two Cousins, you say what you want about him, but when the pressure's on, he's been producing here down the stretch. So I'll take that extra half a point. Vikings the pick in the doghouse.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. If you have any questions for us, Chris and Dom, you have any questions for them or me, You want to go ahead and talk about last minute lineup changes, maybe a waiver wire pickup that you could still do just before your fantasy championship game? Please go ahead and let us know. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. I know these guys right here host a great sports show that you got to check out. So, Dom, before we head on out, my friend, wanted to ask you quick, what's up for you and your dad on the Dom-iNation, Sports Nation?
Well, I'll say football, football, and more football. And obviously, NFL is ramping up, playoffs are close, and that's what we'll be talking about. And we didn't have a chance to talk about the World Cup, so I'm sure we'll talk about that in our next pod.
Messi. Yeah, there you go. Messi did it again. So congratulations to Argentina on that. And also as well, congratulations to you guys on some great podcasts. Please go ahead and check out Dom-iNation, Sports Nation today, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. We're wishing you happy holidays, a happy new year. Hopefully we'll be back next week with Hopefully we'll be back next week with some results and also some information on the playoffs upcoming for the NFL. Some thoughts on that. Who will go all the way? Be interesting to hear a conversation with Chris and Dom, with me, on who we think will go all the way this year for the Super Bowl. So I definitely want to have a playoffs talk with these guys, plus the aftermath of all these fantasy football championships, including my own. So I'm getting a little nervous here as we get closer and closer to the playoff game, to the finals, to the championship game. Guys, any last advice for me before we head on out? I know I am playing a relative, I believe, of yours.
Yeah, it's my nephew and Dom's cousin, Steven. He is perennially in the playoffs, and not only our league, but Dom runs a league, and Dom's facing him in the championship. So maybe both of you can be Dragon Slayers this week.
We'll see. Hopefully I will slay a dragon, but I'm just hoping for a good showing. If I score 120, 100, I read now projected 118. If I score 120 and lose, you know what? Then it is what it is. That's what I say. If I get the projected amount from my guys, that's all I can ask, and then we'll just play the chips from there. So we'll see what happens, but I'm wishing you out there success. Dom, success. I'm hoping for you this weekend as far as your game is concerned. Hoping for everybody out there in their championship game, all the best in the world. Again, if you have any questions for us, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. So for Chris and Dom Lardieri from the Dom-iNation Sports Nation, it's Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Again, wishing you all the best of luck this weekend as far as your fantasy football championship game. Hoping it will be a win for you and a title for you from your friends right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.